Well, good afternoon to Mountain, Central, and Eastern time zones, and good morning still to our friends in the Pacific time zone. We're going to give it just a few minutes while people load into the webinar, and then we will get started. All right, well, it looks like we've got a large chunk of people in, and welcome to our first Association Essentials series of 2023. This month's topic, the intersection of business, governance, and community. Just a reminder, you can find all of our upcoming training sessions and all our previously done training sessions at the training tab at HOALiving.com. Go down to Association Essentials series and you will find all that information. Upcoming schedule, just a reminder, we're going to skip a week, or not be the last week of March, but the next week, and we have two great presentations. On Tuesday, April the 4th, we will talk about federal laws that apply to associations. And then on Wednesday the 5th, we have a special for our friends in the state of Utah, legislative update. Mercifully, the legislative session ends next Friday, and we will give you an update on the association bills, several association bills this year. But I think the ones we want to pass are passing, the ones we don't want to pass are not going to pass or be heard. So that's April 5th for Utah. And then at the end of April, we'll do Financials 101, and you can see the schedule for the year. So please join us. Also, in addition, back for 2023, we'll do this a couple times virtually during the year. The CAI Board Leadership Certificate course. This is a course written through the Community Associations Institute, and we've shrunk it down and modified it and made it. It's typically 8 hours. We've taken it and cliff noted it. So 9 a.m. to noon Mountain Time, 9 a.m. to noon Mountain Time, and learn how to be even a more effective board member on Saturday, April the 15th. And several of my fine co-workers will help us teach on that day. Hey, please connect with us in different ways. We do little micro trainings several times a week, and you can keep up to date in all the HOA Living world. We're on social media, Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, and LinkedIn. Also, if you're one of our clients, you are automatically getting Community Scoop each month. That is our monthly e-newsletter for board members, general in nature. And then the website, of course, HOALiving.com, that we looked at just a moment ago. And then all of the recorded sessions are here on our YouTube channel. You can scan that QR code to go directly to there. I am your presenter. If you don't know me, I'm Michael Johnson, and I am the CEO of the HOA Living Group of Companies. I serve on the CAI National Board of Trustees and was Educator of the Year last year. So a great honor. We love to teach these events, and hopefully we won't waste your time for the next 30 to 40 minutes. I did have reconstructive jaw surgery 12 weeks ago, and so both jaws broken, moved forward, and so talking 85% back, but if you can't understand me, well, put a little note or something, we'll figure it out. But I think I generally can hear myself when the word comes out wrong, and we'll try to repeat it. So let's get right into our topic of what is a community association. We're going to first into our webinar today highlights from the recently published 2022 homeowner satisfaction survey results that overwhelmingly continues to show that community associations remain the preferred place to call home when it comes to finding housing. Some of the results from that survey show that 89% of residents rate their overall satisfaction of living in a community association as very good or neutral. Okay, so 89%. 87% say that their elected governing boards absolutely, or for the most part, strive to serve the best interests of the community as a whole. Most of our participants are board members who watch these, and so good job. Keep it up. 87% say that you're doing a good job in managing your communities. 74% say the manager provides value and support to residents in the community as a whole, and 68% say that the rules in their community help protect and enhance the property values. All right, so the three main characteristics of a community association, right? Governance, business, and community. The governance, of course, are owners, all of us as owners in associations are obligated to follow all the rules and regulations that are in the community's governing documents. These are businesses. Owners have to pay mandatory monthly, often, or maybe annual or quarterly assessments that funds the operation and maintenance of the association. Some of you have budgets in the tens of millions of dollars. Some of you have budgets that are $10,000 a year. That's okay. You're still a business. And the third prong is community. Everyone has to be a member of the homeowners association. It's automatic and it's mandatory. So these are the three parts of community associations. And we understand governance and we understand business because we do it 99% of our time. But what is community? What does it really mean to build community in our associations? Well, what it means is an increased quality of life. So is your homeowner better? Is their life better because they live in an association as opposed to the same kind of house not in association? Maintenance of property and or common areas. So sometimes it's our building, sometimes it's just some common area, sometimes it's both. Increased property values. That's a part of building community. Typically, we find that people that live in community associations, in addition to having more services generally, are valued at 5 to 7% more than a typical home. And protections, lots of protections that come from that contract, which is the governing documents, and from the law, and from the oversight of a board. So once again, governance, business, and community. From CAI, there's about 10 fundamentals of community associations. And I've made a little grid here. So that first box, G for governance, B for business, C for community. Number one, associations ensure the collective rights and interests of homeowners are respected and preserved. Well, that checks off all three categories, right? Governance, business, and community. Associations are the most local form of representative democracy, with leaders elected by the members to govern in the best interest of all the residents. So this is governance and community. The worst bill, a horrible bill that has been introduced twice in Utah now, forgets that this fundamental truth that associations are the most basic form of representative democracy, that nowhere else will I have such few members represented by an elected body to help govern the area I live in. So that's a big deal. Associations provide services and amenities to residents, protect property values, and meet the established expectation of homeowners. That's part of the business. Associations succeed when they cultivate a true sense of community, homeowner involvement, and a culture of building consensus. Well, obviously that's community building, but if you have consensus, it's easier to make changes to the governance of the association. Association homeowners have the right to elect their community leaders and to use the democratic process to influence policies that will protect their investments. Obviously, that's governance, but it's allowing them for business and even for community, right? Their involvement to mean something. Association homeowners choose where to live and accept a contractual ethical responsibility to abide by the policies and meet financial obligations. That's governance and business. Association leaders, you must protect the community's financial health by using effective management practices and sound business principles. Association leaders have a legal and ethical obligation to enforce the association's governing documents and abide by the applicable laws. A legal and ethical obligation, you don't have a choice. You have to do that. That's obviously governance. Association leaders seek an effective balance between the preferences of individual residents and the collective rights of homeowners. That covers all three prongs. Association leaders and residents should be reasonable, flexible, and open to the possibility and benefits of compromise, especially when faced with divergent views, right? So that's really governance, but it builds community by being reasonable, flexible, and listening to divergent views. So community associations, right? Business, governance, and the community, they overlap. And as we go into each of these three specifically, you will see that very often overlapping. So governance, what forms the legal basis and authority for what we do in the community association world? Obviously, federal, state, and local statutes. So the 1st of April, we're going to have a presentation just on federal statutes and case law that affects our industry. And on April 5th for Utah, we will have state statutes that affect our industry. And we're seeing even local cities, counties, municipalities that are starting to sometimes get into the HOA, Community Association statute game. Regulations that we have to follow, case law, right? Everything's not always defined in the statutes, and so a court case becomes case law. Then it's just as important as the statutes on the books. The legal documents of the association will go into those. There's lender requirements, right? So FHA, Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac, they have regulations and requirements that will make us have to do certain things in the way we govern our associations if we want to have secondary lending. And then there's standards set by professional bodies. So we have the accountants and the attorneys and insurance and mortgage. They have rules that filter down and affect us in our communities. So when looking at our legal basis, some of you might be familiar with CAI's hierarchy of governing documents. It's a triangle that goes from most important at the top to least important at the bottom, or not important, but applicable. We go foundational, looking at an arch here. The laws and statutes are the foundation, and then the recorded map, plat, or plan, and then the declaration, CC&R's master deed, the articles of incorporation, the bylaws, and then our rules, regulations, and resolutions that we pass just as a board. So remember that on this arch example, if the law says something, then we can't have a CC&R or a rule that says something contrary. If the CC&Rs say this is a no pet community, we can't have a rule that says pets under 10 pounds are allowed, because the CC&Rs are higher up on the hierarchy, and you would have to change those. You can't just do a rule. If your documents in the law don't state specifics, then you can have a rule, a resolution, regulation that clarifies that information. So all those top things obviously are the governing documents. That's what we refer them to. They define homeowner and associations' rights and obligations. They create a legally binding relationship between entities. The CC&Rs are a contract, and each contract has to have two parties. The homeowner and the association is who that contract's in between. So sometimes when we're doing legislation in our various states, and there's an issue like solar panels, and the legislature wants to come in and say, associations, you cannot tell a homeowner they can't do, and I'm talking about attached product where the association owns the roof. Associations, you can't tell homeowners that they can't do solar panels. Well, we go back and we're like, but there's a private contract. The homeowner agreed prior to buying, and they don't have to sign a piece of paper. It's recorded and it runs with the land, right? Well before they bought. That creates a binding relationship. And if those CC&Rs say no solar panels, or the association gets to govern that, sometimes even though it's an issue we care about, we're always standing up for the association, that representative democracy on the most basic level, their rights to make decisions that's best for their association. Now, sometimes when it comes to like water rules and landscaping in the drought, we tell the legislature, they're like, well, why aren't you opposed to this? Well, sometimes we have to decide it's for the greater good of humanity to have the state come in and say, thou shalt not require, irrigated sod everywhere. It's a balance, but we're always trying to let the associations govern themselves based on these governing documents. And the governing documents establish the process for governing and how we fund the association's needs. And then it sets rules and regulations. There's a great previously done session. You can scan that QR code. It'll take you right to our governing documents 101. June 22nd was when it was taught, so it's not upcoming, but you can go and view that video, and it's there. This is all about governing documents, and so we go into great detail on all of those. So governance, who? Well, one, the owners, right? Owners don't have a lot of specific rights per se. They have the right to elect and remove board members, and they have the right to make amendments to those governing documents, CC&R's bylaws. So that's really the rights of homeowners are limited to those couple things. But when we look at the intersection of governance, business, and community, owner participation is required for an association to function. And by fostering a sense of community, that will encourage participation. Now, the board is that elected governing body of volunteers, right? That the representative democracy has voted these 3, 5, 7, hopefully not much larger than 7 members to make the day-to-day decisions for their community. We're not, even if there's 36 homes, it's improbable for us to send the landscaping bids to every homeowner and get their input. So just like we elect members of the Senate and the House at the state level, or city council at the city level, to make decisions on our behalf, that's the same thing. We elect a board to make decisions. If we're not happy with the decisions they're making, and the documents and law allow them to make those decisions, then we cannot elect them again. And if it's absolutely a heinous act, then we can recall them. Governing documents in the law grant and restrict board authority. So the things that boards can do are specifically allowed in the bylaws typically. I want to just kind of, and we talked about this in the governing documents section. Sometimes the laws and the governing documents have the word may or may not, and sometimes it has shall or shall not. So remember, may and may not, that's a permission. You can or cannot do that. But an obligation is you have to do it. So an example of may language in a statute could be found here, right? The first one in orange there, amends and enacts provisions regarding associated unit owners may establish. And then down on line 21, amends provisions regarding the rules and association may establish. Shall language, right? An association of unit owners shall adopt rules supporting water efficient landscaping, including allowance for low water use on lawns during drought conditions. And a rule shall be reasonable. So these are shall words. This is from the state of Utah last year. This has been modified a little bit this year to make it even better for those trying to decrease water use. Every association has to adopt water efficient landscaping rules. And so if you haven't done that yet, you need to get on that in Utah. Here's some survey results from the homeowner satisfaction survey. 87% of respondents say they are on friendly terms with their association board. And you can see the history. They've been doing these surveys every other year, basically, since 2005. 87% say members of the elected governing board absolutely, or for the most part, serve the best interest of their community. So getting down to our board members and officers. So remember, being an officer is not, there are some associations that do it differently, but generally the board, the officers are elected from those members of the board. So there's 7 members of the board, then the board elects who the president is, vice president, secretary, treasurer. Those are not separate elections and are generally not voted on by the homeowners. So the president represents the board among the members, sets agendas, and presides over meetings. They have the same authority as all other board members. So they don't have a veto power. They can't choose to not bring something to the attention of the board. The president is just another board member officer, but they're the ones who sets the agenda and presides over meetings. The VP assists if the president's unable to do those things. The secretary. I often say, secretary, you guys are the most valuable, important position on a board because you are the caretakers of the meeting minutes, which are the official records of the actions of the association. So it's important they're done correctly, and it's important they're approved at the next meeting, and important that they're posted on your community's portal or are otherwise available to the membership, right? This is the official record, very important secretary duty. And then treasurer, basically the chief financial officer of the association and oversees the annual operating budgets, maintains accounts, recommends financial action, takes responsibility for financial documents. So according to CAI documents, governance guidelines include, in accordance with community governing documents and applicable laws and regulations, a board should. Here's just a small list, not a limiting list, but a small list of all the things that boards generally do in governing an association. Continue learning. I just want to emphasize that by taking time out of your schedule today to watch this webinar and going back and watching webinars and going to the board leadership certificate course, this is continuing to learn. And it shows your homeowners and a judge, if you had a case eventually, I hope you don't, that you are doing the best that you can possibly do. Just remember though, a board may, not shall, I would love it to be shall, but a board may hire professional management to assist with these responsibilities. So the companies in the HOALiving network that are management companies, you can hire them to do all these things for you. You're still in charge. Management companies are not individual decision makers. So if a community has made a rule that snow will not be removed until 2 inches has fallen, that's the community's rule. That's not the management's rules. Management is hired to enforce the community standards and according to the desires of the board. So a homeowner might send in a complaint, but it's not an issue in the documents or for the board. Just by calling it into management doesn't mean management has the authority to do anything about it. And this is what we've talked about, right? Community associations are the most representative and responsive forms of local democracy in America. That comes from an essential guide for homeowner leaders. All right, so that's governance. Now let's move over to business, the business component of community associations. Remember, much like local, state, and federal governments collect taxes, right, to pay for services, community associations collect assessments to fund the services and programs that they are obligated to provide. It's a pay-to-play. Membership is mandatory and automatic. You can't, if the only thing your association has is a swimming pool, and you say, I don't swim, I don't even know how to swim, so I'm never using the pool, I'm not going to pay $30 a month to be a member of this swimming pool association, doesn't matter. Membership is mandatory and automatic. Members must abide by the documents, governing documents, and pay assessments accordingly. And members share ownership of the common areas, and the assessments are used in large part to maintain them. Okay. Boards and homeowners, keeping them responsible, need to make sure that there's carefully budgeted budgets for the funds, that the money is responsibly spent, and any leftover going into long-term savings is soundly, and I would say safely, invested. Most associations are incorporated. And state nonprofit corporation laws require documents to be available to the membership, to the homeowners that will, so they can inspect them. Has to be reasonable. They can't say, I'm coming down in 5 minutes, open up all your accounting for me. But they have a right to those documents. Another from the survey, 58% of residents say their association assessments are just the right amount or too little. So this survey was done at the latter half of 2022. Inflation was gearing up. A lot of associations raising assessments just to pay for services. Homeowners will fight you regardless of how much, the bills have gone up. So I can see that's why there's probably a little dip in this satisfaction amount on assessments. It's a no-win, right? You do everything you can to keep the assessments reasonable, but then there's inflation and people will literally come out and say, hey, I'm on a fixed income. I can't pay any more. Well, if you lived in a house not in an association, your costs would go up too. So take that for what it's worth and just be mindful of that. So what is the full budgeting process? Part of this business component: planning, gather information on the expenses, reviewing expenses, operating and reserves, and setting assessments. There's not a slide in here, but if you go to our previous trainings, we have a budgeting 101 already for you. Now, there's two types of assessments in communities associations, right? Our regular ones, we need, there's 120 homes in the association. We need $12,000. And so you divide 12,000 by 120 per month, $100 per unit. And then that's what needs to be to pay the bills and to save for the future. The governing documents will establish the type and method of payments. If you're in a condominium, you're going to have a list at the end of your governing documents. So it's going to say Unit 404, you pay a 0.125% of the assessment. And on Unit 703 is smaller by half, they're going to pay a 0.0625 or something like that. If you're in a single family sub-association or a non-condominium of any kind, even if you're attached, you're going to pay an equal share generally. The documents will state that. Then the other kind of assessments are the kinds we don't care for: special assessments, one-time fees to cover non-routine or unbudgeted expenses that cannot wait for the next fiscal year, such as urgent repairs to a roof. So you have a huge water or a huge windstorm in the community, and it's not an insurable event for some reason, and there's not money in savings to pay for it. You can do a special assessment according to your documents, guidelines to fund that. Or anywhere here in Utah where I'm located today, we had a snow removal budget for the 2022-2023 budgeting year. And by middle of December, all those funds that we budgeted were used, and we're having a huge blizzard today. And so my association that I live in and am broadcasting from right now has a meeting of the board on Monday night and has a special assessment they're presenting to the homeowners, just because of how much snow has been this year. Okay. People don't like it, but you got to pay the bills, and you can't control Mother Nature a lot of times. So some of the things assessments cover, right? Really just about anything that the governing documents allow. And then in the event, once again, there's our special assessments. So rules, this is on rules. Do the rules in your community protect and enhance property values, harm them, or make no difference? 89% of residents say their association's rules protect and enhance property values or have a neutral effect. Only 7% say that rules harm property values. Well, sometimes we think of rules as thou shalt not have Christmas lights up in July, and thou shalt not, have trash around your lot or a broken down car. Collections and the collection policy that you have is a rule, a regulation. And so, and you can see it's the intersection of the business and governance. You are business, people owe money. You have to have a way to collect that money if they choose not to pay to continue the governance part of the association. So having a written collection policy protects the association, helps the association avoid lawsuits, and because we're treating everyone the same. We have an association that doesn't want to do a new collections policy. They said, brand new client, they want everything coming to them to make a decision how to handle. That's exactly how you get sued, because someone and you're kinder to them or meaner to them, whatever the case might be, than someone in the community you don't know. By having a written collections policy, we're following steps. So there's no favoritism. We treat everyone the same. I love when I go to visit a board meeting and a member of the board comes up and says, hey, your people sent me a collection letter or sent me a violation letter for my trash cans. Yeah, because we don't care that you're on the board. Our job is to treat everyone the same. We don't even look at that kind of information. Same idea on a collections policy. Avoid favoritism, protect your association against lawsuits, and make sure you're treating everyone the same way. There is a lovely in our library of previous events by Mr. Neal there, resolution writing for your community. And so if you have no idea how to write a collection policy resolution, you can watch this and also talk to your assigned community manager, who I'm sure has been working hard to make sure that your community has a collection policy. All right. So let's finish up then. We've talked about governance. We've talked about business. Let's talk about this third component of community associations, and that is community. What is it exactly? I like this quote from the Essential Guide for Homeowner Leaders. It's easy to focus attention on the governance and business aspects, right? We talked about it for the last 20 minutes because of their immediacy. However, a strong sense of community among residents and clear lines of communication focuses everyone's attention on the positive benefits of being a part of the community and encourages participation in the association's activities. As a result, governance and business operations become less problematic. So communicating is a part of a strong sense of community. Participation is a form of strong sense of community. How do we create community spirit? How do we create it, maintain it, nurture it? Once again, meaningful and consistent communication. We have available to our clients this welcome to your HOA welcome packet, right? And communities can have their newsletters in there, or newsletters is another way. So newsletters is one way to communicate. Welcome packets is another way. We generally put some previous newsletters in the welcome packets. And then social media, right? Your community might have some social media channels to communicate to your owners. Our welcome packets generally have local, it's just a little plug, local magazines, signing up for auto withdrawal programs, welcome letters from HOA, the board, responsibility charts in your community, who's responsible for what different things. So you can see some of those things. If you're interested in every new homeowner, we typically send these when we get notice of a ownership change. Let your community manager know, and we can get you on this program. So board members, ideas, e-blast, newsletters, social media. There's programs that are really good at providing templates and making it easy for you to create some of this messaging. But we also know that board members are busy and they're doing everything for their community. But hopefully maybe you can find a communications committee of non-board members to volunteer and help do some of this communication. Also, at HOALiving, we have full graphics department, marketing department, and can help for a very nominal cost, just trying to cover our costs, put these things together for you. One thing we're doing each month to the board members is the community scoop. It's general in nature. We want, once again, transparency and clear communication. So take that community scoop, maybe add a cover letter to it, maybe don't, and forward it on to all the homeowners in your community. Would be a great way. And a great education. So meaningful and consistent communication, program involvement, then is our second one. So have social activities, right? Don't count on the PTA or the local church congregation or whatever to do your social, your good works, your service opportunities, or just socializing, or having town halls, seminars, learning opportunities in your community. Put those together. This is a great way to build community spirit. Promoting community spirit will create emotional equity, increases volunteerism, resolves disagreements easier, and promotes practices that will result in an effective association from the CAI documents. So promoting community spirit increases community pride, and that in turn leads to higher resale values. My friends in the real estate industry will tell you over and over that a well-run association with great community spirit, they not only want to have people live in those communities. And so they will drive them to those communities to look for the homes when looking to buy. Once again, right? Governance, business, and community. It's a three-legged stool. And if you don't have one of the legs functioning properly, it's too short or too long, that stool's going to fall over, or it's going to lean, or lots of other not desirable outcomes. So I know we get drowned in governance and business. And that's one thing really, right? Give as much of that as you can to your professional management via contract, of course. And then you focus on that building community component. There's resources that we can help you with and that you can purchase, but all three of these working together make an incredible, effective association. That's our presentation for this month on the intersection of community associations, governance, business, and community. If you have any questions, you are welcome to pop on now and ask them. Is there anything in the chat, team? Barry Johnson has raised his hand. Someone gonna turn Barry on? Okay,
Yeah,
Barry, there you go. You're unmuted.
Can you hear me?
We can hear you.
Michael, I was just curious if these slides that you've been presenting are online, if we have accessibility to them, because they're very good, and I'd like to go back and review them.
Great question. When you go to that training tab on the HOALiving website, you can see a video of the slides, and then also there's a downloadable version of the slides. I might be making that up, but I'm pretty sure that there's a downloadable version of the slides. And then Jessica, do we also email them out to the registered folks?
Yes, we do. So you can share that with other board members, and then they are available at hoaliving.com/AES if you want to get directly there. So you do have access to that. There are a couple of comments that have in the Q&A, Michael. Crystal is asking if there is a state statute for tenants and the homeowner providing tenant documentation.
Well, that's a good question. Some states, and I assume most probably in Utah, I'm trying to think if there's a specific statute that requires that. That's obviously a best practice that should happen. And when I'm a homeowner and I own a rental unit in an association, I need to make sure to pass on everything to those tenants. Because remember, it's not the association's responsibility to communicate with two different groups for one unit. So they communicate with the homeowner or their management company, and it's their responsibility. We actually have in our bill in the state of Utah that should pass in the next week to help associations a small rental permit fee for the extra work. So basically, what we're finding, and this is not a blanket statement for all landlords, of course, but what we're finding is that a lot of owners don't communicate to their tenants. The tenants break rules, not even knowing they're breaking rules. And so we've asked the legislature if you could pay the association a little bit of money for the extra work, the association can communicate to the owner and to the resident. That still, it passed the Senate, hasn't passed the House in Utah. Other states have similar kind of situation. Not, remember, these are membership, associations are membership organizations. Who's the member? The member is the owner of the unit, not the tenants. But man, we sure need to communicate to those tenants. And so we're trying to find ways to do that. Great question. Other questions, Jessica?
Yes, Elton is asking, he said, we have a homeowner that bought here 10 months ago, but has not paid any HOA fees. How would you go about handling that?
Yeah, so, an effective collection policy, one thing that delinquent homeowners often say is, well, I haven't been paying for 10 months, so you should have got a hold of me 8 months ago. Well, it doesn't work that way. You have a collection policy. You can start the collection process regardless of how long they've been delinquent. A lot of times we get a lot of new clients that come to the HOALiving management companies because an association's delinquencies have gotten so high. You can start whenever you can start, but following that collection policy, it doesn't guarantee payment, right? It doesn't guarantee payment, but it protects the association's interests best possible. So you can put a lien eventually after notices on that delinquent homeowner's home or unit, but they still, and we'll talk about this when we're talking about federal laws on April 4th, they still are protected by bankruptcy protections, which is a federal law. They could be, every state, most states, there's a handful of states that have what's called a priority lien, but most states, especially in the Western US, do not have that. And association's lien is subject to the mortgage and to other previously filed lien documents. But if you don't file the lien, then you definitely aren't going to have any rights going forward. So good question. Get with your community manager, and if you're not professionally managed, feel free to send us an email, and we can follow up with you on some suggestions. Jessica, next question.
Okay, Charlene says our board is comprised of 4 officers. They were told the requirement for an odd number of board members did not apply, and they were grandfathered in. Do you agree, or how does that work?
So in most states, it doesn't specifically say there has to be an odd number. That's a best practice, right? Because in a board of 4, if there's a split vote and 2 people feel this way and 2 people feel this way, how do you get something done? Now, most things in community associations aren't, you're butting heads and it's going to be 2 to 2 votes, but there definitely can be times. We would highly recommend that the bylaws be amended so it goes down to 3 or up to 5, but there's no state statute that requires an odd number necessarily. And we do see the even number sometime out there. And yeah, it's just tricky. But the only way to resolve that is to amend the bylaws. In Utah, in Idaho, in Arizona, all the nonprofit acts defer, so that it says, unless the bylaws say otherwise, this is the standard. Well, because it says unless the bylaws say otherwise, and your bylaws say 4 board members, you got 4 board members until you amend those bylaws. Great question. Any others, Jessica?
Yep, one more. Lance says we have a small landscaping HOA. Is there an exemption that we can file to exempt ourselves from reserve studies since we have no tangible capital structures?
That's a great question. That's probably Utah, but other states also have similar requirements that associations have a reserve study performed every 3 to 6 years. Utah says you're required to have a reserve analysis. So you don't have to have a professional company do it. The board can do it. And we have had boards, even professionals have written a letter for like $100, or the board writes a memo and it says reserves, and it writes the law requiring every 3 years or 6 years a study to be done. And it says at this time, the association has no items or requirements for a reserve that would go into reserve analysis. Therefore, this memo is to let you know that statute has been completed. So we do have that on record some places where it just says there is nothing. It's a paper or memo that just lets people know, don't be looking for a reserve study or reserve analysis because we don't have anything to reserve for. I hope that's helpful. And we can get you a template for that as well.
Okay, we have one more about our favorite subject that we hear about is dog poop. If you have a homeowner or a tenant who allows a pet to roam freely, how do you go about handling this?
Well, that's the biggest thing is identification, right? So that, I'm just going to say the way that's worded is we know whose dog it is. A lot of times we don't know whose dog it is, and that's a problem. But if you know whose dog it is, you can follow a pattern, right? Most states allow, there's a cap on how much you can fine, but you see it do what it's doing, you make a note of it, you have a violation letter sent out, courtesy notice, and then a $25 each time after that, or $100 each time after that. And then financially, they're kind of being hit with a fine that should hopefully make them want to come into compliance. Now, Utah's joined a couple of years ago, several other states, that fines can't be collected like assessments. It used to be they could in Utah, which was beautiful. But fines now are kind of pulled apart, and you can't foreclose on a home just because of fines. You think about it, that's probably a good thing. But then if they're not paying the fine, so you can go to small claims court and get a judgment. And ultimately, we haven't done it for dog poop, but for dogs roaming like that who are dangerous and who will bite kids and people and attack other dogs, we've gone to the court, and the court has made those owners get rid of that pet. So that power does exist. It's a legal process, of course, but we're glad to get you more information on that.
So the original question had mentioned a tenant. So in situations where you would fine, it would have to be towards the homeowner and not the tenant. Is that correct?
Yeah, we can't fine tenants because they're not members of our association, but we can fine their owner. Now, in my rentals that are in associations, I have an addendum that says, please note, dear tenant, you are a member, you're residing in XYZ Community Association. And there are specific governing documents, rules, and regulations that apply to you living here. And I even put links for them to click on to see those documents. And then I say, please note, if I, your landlord, get fined because of you breaking a rule, I'm going to take it out of your deposit. So that landlords need to do that for their communities. But yeah, we can't go fine a tenant directly because they're not members of the association. The fine goes to the owner. But if I'm an owner and I'm getting fined all the time for a tenant, then it's going to make me not want to keep that tenant around. There's plenty of demand that I don't need to have a bad tenant. I know that's easier said than done, but that's the general gist. Anything else, Jessica?
Yeah, we have one question about CCNRs and bylaws conflicting. Our bylaws state our board is comprised of 5 members. However, our CCNRs reflect this, but also state that the board of directors can be reduced to 3 directors. Is this in opposition?
Okay, so I'm going to see if I can very quickly get back to that slide. And it's all the way at the beginning. And so my apologies. But so that's a great question. So remember our hierarchy of documents somewhere as we back review this entire thing. There we go. Okay. So the CCNRs are higher rated than the bylaws, right? They're more foundational document. So if I understand, the bylaws say 5, but the CCNRs say 3 to 5. Is that what it says, Jessica?
It says it can be reduced to 3 directors.
Yeah. So the CCNRs have a higher value. They're closer to the foundation. So even though the bylaws say 5, because the CCNRs say 3 to 5, you could have 3. It'd be nice to make those match up in an amendment, of course, but when there's conflict in those 2 documents, CCNRs are higher rated than bylaws, so that one trumps. If the CCNR, and we've seen this in old documents, if the CCNRs on page 12 say there'll be 5 board members, and on page 18 say there'll be 3 board members, then it's in the same document and the board can draft a resolution saying we're following page 12, not page 18. Well, it's 1 o'clock and it's probably time for us to move on. I've gone over and now I'm way advanced in the slides, so I'm not going to put the slide back up there, but we will have on April 4th will be our federal laws presentation on April 5th, Utah specific. And then at the end of April, Finances 101. We appreciate you joining us today. Please reach out anytime with additional questions. Great questions today, by the way. And thanks for joining us. We'll see you soon.